Alright, hey, good evening, folks. Once again, we are back taking a look at the tropics. Tonight is Tuesday, September 27th, 2022. We continue to track Major Hurricane Ian this evening on approach to the southwest coast of Florida. We've had some changes throughout the afternoon, but overall, Ian remains on schedule, forecasted to be landfalling as a powerful Category 3 or 4 hurricane sometime tomorrow along the southwest coast of Florida, somewhere south of the Tampa area, somewhere around Sarasota, most likely, or somewhere just south, and then move across the state of Florida through central Florida and appear off the coast of northeast Florida sometime on Friday, and then is expected to recurve now up into parts of Georgia and South Carolina in the days to follow through the weekend. So we've got a lot to get to this evening. In the latest, we're going to talk Ian himself for about 4 or 5 minutes. And then we're going to switch to northeast Florida's specific impacts. So we're going to do both in the same video. Let's get right to it. Evening satellite presentation of Ian is an impressive hurricane. Ian left the coast of Cuba earlier today and began to intensify almost immediately after leaving land. The storm had a almost mind-blowingly good structure after spending time over Cuba, and the pressure began to free fall once again. Pressure falls up to 3 to 4 millibars per hour were observed. Ian is somewhere in the 940s tonight, in the upper to mid 940s in terms of pressure, which is really impressive. However, the storm is undergoing what we call an eye wall replacement cycle at this hour. You can see the eye of Ian is shrinking on the satellite image as these really tall pinks and white clouds wrap around the eye. You can see how the eye is beginning to shrink, and this is called an eye wall replacement. This is something powerful hurricanes do. The eye wall will eventually constrict to the point where it can no longer, the physics no longer really allow for it, in the lack of a better term, and a secondary ring of wind will appear around the eye and then become the new eye as the old eye drops out of the storm. We can see this on the Key West radar over on Martin Dissenbaum's site at Florida State University. We can see here pretty clear that we have two separate eyes. We have a tighter ring right here, and then we have this much larger ring trying to encompass it. I probably could draw these a little bit better. So this is the inner ring right here, and this is the outer ring right here. You can see these feeder bands wrapping into the outer eye wall, and this inner eye is beginning to collapse. You can see the convection starting to go down, and there's a moat of drier air within here, and that is because a larger eye is about to take over for Ian. So this does two things. It does weaken the storm, quote unquote, on the Saffir-Simpson scale. It does bring the maximum winds down. However, it does also increase the maximum width of the storm, the size of the storm, and the scope of the impacts of the storm, and also the storm surge generated by the hurricane. Storm surge is not just dependent on winds. It is dependent on the size of the hurricane, and Ian is going to produce probably even more storm surge. So this isn't good news. This is just sucks in a different way kind of news, if that makes sense. The storm is just simply going to be larger. It's going to push even more water. And this hurricane force winds of Ian are going to expand and probably impact even more people. So why this may have capped him off from becoming a top end Category 4 or Category 5, it's not going to mean that there's less impacts overall. It means just as many, if not more. A lot of hurricanes have done this in history. The most infamous is Hurricane Katrina did this before landfall. She went from a 5 to a 3 but got bigger, and the impacts were still catastrophic. So as we get to this point in time, focusing on the category and the exact wind speed it's kind of splitting hairs at this point, and it doesn't really matter. Ian's a very powerful hurricane. It's over warm water. It is not going to weaken much before landfall, and it is coming right for southwest Florida. The Hurricane Center's 8 p.m. advisory does show that track, again, has been moving southward throughout the day. We had this still more into Tampa this morning, and now it looks like, that landfall is going to be about 30, 40 miles down the coast further, somewhere around Englewood or Sarasota. Again, as a major hurricane, the landfall is expected sometime tomorrow afternoon, about 18 or so hours from now, 20 hours from now. Ian should be making landfall and then moving slowly throughout the day. It's going to take Ian 24 hours to get from the coast to about central Florida. So this is about 70, 80 miles as if you were driving a car. And it's going to take Ian pretty much 24 hours to do it. So Ian's going to be moving, not walking speed, but at a brisk jogging speed across Florida is what it looks like. And then you can see now the Hurricane Center does forecast this to come all the way across Florida, exit somewhere around the Space Coast or maybe Daytona in that range, and then curve up the coast past Jacksonville and make another landfall somewhere around Georgia or South Carolina going into Friday night. So this means that the heavy impacts from Ian associated with him are going to be across the Florida Peninsula starting Wednesday afternoon and lasting through much of Friday. This is going to be a long hurricane. So A lot of impacts coming. There's some wind shear and some drier air coming in to weaken Ian as it moves in, but it's probably not going to get here in time to significantly weaken the hurricane before it makes landfall, so don't fall in love with that. A quick broad brush overview of the impacts to come. This is the European model's prediction for the rainfall to come, and is pretty prolific. We're seeing widespread totals on this map of 15 to 20 inches, pockets both in northeast Florida and along where the eye is coming ashore, as potential for extreme flooding rainfall, in this region, and then widespread berth of 8 to 12 inches of rain for much of the peninsula of Florida. Again, notice even like parts out into Lake City and down towards Lake Okeechobee and stuff. I mean, a lot of people are getting a lot of rainfall from this, and the freshwater flooding threat is fairly high. The storm surge threat is also exceptionally high. 8 to 12 feet is now the regional forecast. So the southward trend had some good news. Tampa Bay's surge forecast is now just bad. It's not horrific like it was. It's not 10, 12 feet into Tampa Bay, because that core of the wind shifted further south, and they're on the kind of opposite flow side. But still 6-foot water rise in Tampa Bay. That's a grown man standing at the beach, and the water is at the top of his head. I mean, that's a ton of water rise, and this is going to still be a very significant flooding event for Tampa Bay. But 8 to 12 feet, and with this eye wall replacement cycle, I would lean towards 12 feet in this region. This is not the place to be on the coast. This is going to be the worst water rise y'all have seen in some time. It'll be worse than Hurricane Charlie. If y'all were down here for Charlie, Ian is going to push a lot more water than Charlie did. Ian's a much bigger hurricane than Charlie was. Even if it's not going to be quite as strong, it doesn't get that 150, 155 range that Charlie was in, it's still going to push more water than Charlie did, and the surge will be worse than Charlie. Be one of the worst storm surges this part of Florida has taken on the last probably 40, 50 years at least. So that water rise is bad. The Weather Prediction Center kind of showing another look at the rainfall totals, 10 to 12 inches, however you want to call it, over a foot for a lot of folks. This is going to be a lot of rainfall. Wind gusts forecast to come. Wind gusts near the coast, of course, and well over 100 miles an hour, probably in the 120s, 130s. This is going to be a devastating wind event near the coastline here. But notice how far these inland numbers reach. Wind gusts into 80 and 90 mile an hour in central Florida. We're talking about wind gusts to hurricane force along the coast of Jacksonville, and even down into Flagler County and whatnot, and then back across north central Florida. Wind gusts 55, 65 miles an hour. The tropical storm force wind impacts remain very high. National Digital Forecast Database, another way to look at it. This is the National Weather Service's own kind of model and stuff. And again, you can see these hurricane force winds swaths cutting into central Florida. This is going to be a ton of tree damage and a ton of power outages in this cone, and then of course well away from too. This model has slightly less winds in other areas, but still in the 50s and 60s, that's plenty of wind to knock down trees and take out your power. So please respect it. GFS kind of in the middle there, still showing a lot of potential to come. The tornado potential the next couple of days is high. The current outlook shows a slight risk of severe weather from the Storm Prediction Center. There's an active tornado watch tonight for areas south of Lake Okeechobee. Several tornadoes have already been confirmed via radar, like in Everglades and areas like that, and that threat does work up the coast over the next 2 or 3 days. So there will be a significant threat of tornadoes as Ian passes. That's kind of the broad brush for Ian in the overall sense. So let's go ahead and talk a little bit more about the Northeast Florida specific impacts. I want some of my Northeast Florida friends to understand. I haven't watched the local Mets tonight. I don't know what John Gahn and Tim Deegan and Mike Burris are all saying. I think the little bit of vibe I get is that they're kind of downplaying this, and they kind of do that. I've noticed, and I would not downplay this one. The track shifts of Ian have not helped us. The faster speed and the proximity to the coast is offsetting the fact that it's going to landfall sooner than we thought, and we are still in for a ride. Let me show you why. This is the GFS mid-level moisture and winds chart. This shows us kind of how the moisture content in the air looks and the upper level winds. So what I want to pay attention to is the greens and the browns. So those browns are drier air aloft. The greens are obviously more moist air aloft. This is where the heavy rainfall associated with a hurricane will be. So this is set for tomorrow afternoon. So the rainfall is already creeping up. I just want to give you the general sense of how this looks as Ian passes real quick. Then we'll talk impacts. Ian comes in somewhere south of Tampa Bay, as expected. Notice we're still kind of in that kind of sucky part of the storm. And then as it moves up, the dry air sort of comes up under Ian and undercuts the storm. Well, this pushes the worst weather of Ian actually further north. This is going to be a little bit different than the typical right side, bad side, left side, good side. This actually shoves that worst weather kind of up on top of Ian instead of below it. So actually, given this look, you're actually going to see some of the worst weather north of the storm as it passes. This is also combining with a cold front. There's a cold front right about here in the atmosphere, and this is also going to look to focus and constrain that wind. And then also to the north, you've got a strong high pressure cell, so those winds are trying to rotate back along the front. You've got some cooler air aloft helping to enhance rainfall bands that are associated with Ian. So you have Ian mixing with a cold front as it comes through, and that is going to lead to some really bad weather impacts across northeast Florida. You can see we stay in that region of moist air, and again, right where that cold front's mixing in with Ian as it moves by on Friday, and then Friday into Saturday, the drier air doesn't come back in until late on Friday. This will still be a high wind threat, but the rainfall will be ending on Friday afternoon, but the winds will stick around probably until Saturday morning. Let's go ahead and look at the impacts. This is the National Weather Service's actual briefing on Ian. This is on their website, weather.gov. You put in your zip code at the top, and then click on the brief at the top, and then that will get you to this page right here. They have went ahead and moved the tropical weather outlooks to, or their tropical pages right here to the briefing, and this is what they are expecting for our area. You can see here the Jacksonville region, potential winds now up to 75 miles per hour. I think that the coast, like the I-95 corridor, and then points a little bit further south and east, can be expecting wind gusts now probably 75 to 85 miles per hour at the top end. Again, those are the peak gusts. So I want to say the worst gust first, but a lot of sustained winds in that 40, 50 mile an hour range with the gusts to 65, 75, and then closer to the coast and south, you get closer to 85. I think is kind of the cap for us. I don't think we're going to see hurricane force winds, but we are going to see sustained tropical storm force winds. So let's look at the timing and the impact of that. So this is the European model. This is set for tomorrow morning. We're going to have that brisk onshore flow picking up. It's going to be cloudy. There's going to be rain showers. And you're going to have that brisk northeasterly wind, but it's not going to be really bad yet throughout most of Wednesday. So if you've got preparations to do up here, you have tomorrow. You're going to be more wet than you were today, but you kind of have tomorrow to get your final preparations done. But this starts picking up throughout the day. This is mid-morning on Wednesday. You can see those higher winds starting to pick up as that northeast wind flows in. Again, the cold front, the high pressure to the north, Ian's winds to the south. It pinches right around our area and creates this kind of counterflow system where you've got two sets of winds converging into one. You've got those strong onshore winds. You're already seeing wind gusts around 30, 35 miles an hour as we work into the afternoon. This is going to the evening hours. The winds start to pick up a little bit more. You start getting a few gusts up to that 35, 40 mile an hour range. This is when bridges may start to want to close. They'll start watching that really carefully. And now we're at midnight on Thursday morning. Winds are still picking up. And then by Thursday, when the sun rises, you can see here now we're starting to see those 40s and 50s kind of coming into the beaches here. And then by Thursday later in the day is when the winds really start to pick up. Thursday evening is when it starts getting pretty rough. The core of Ian approaches, and then this is where those higher winds start really coming in overnight Thursday and into early Friday morning. Ian passes, still pretty high winds. And again, this is 10-meter wind speed. This isn't gusts, this is sustained winds. So I want to kind of mention that. The sustained tropical storm force winds. So the winds would be gusting 55, 65, and then again near the coast, closer to 70, 80. And then, that sustains through much of the morning, Thursday night into Friday morning, and then Friday evening is when some kind of relief happens as the worst of Ian begins to shoot north, and we just have that more northwest wind behind us. Looking at, the maximum wind gust forecast throughout the whole event here. This is the European model. And again, they're showing those 60 to 65-mile wind gusts for lots of inland counties, western Duval, western Nassau, Clay County, Putnam County, and then counties like eastern, basically the I-95 corridor, St. Johns County, Flagler County. You can be expecting those wind gusts again higher than the inland areas. Closer to the beach you are, there's some markings here of 75, 85 miles an hour. So hurricane force wind gusts possible at the coast, high-end tropical storm force wind gusts possible inland. Let's go back to the graphic for flooding rainfall, which is probably the most prolific threat with this, 10 to 15 inches of rain at least. But look at the extensive flash flooding. This is the highest category you have. This is called extreme flooding concern for our area, as these bands of rain, they're just going to set up and they're not going to go anywhere. It's going to be just a pounding once it starts. Really into Thursday is when it gets going, and it's really not going to let up. and we are looking at potential for heavy rainfall in our area. This is the latest from the European model, again showing those 10 to 15 inches of rain. This is what I told y'all yesterday. This is what I told y'all this morning. I haven't backed off of it, and I don't plan to. This will be a lot of rain. This is going to be probably wetter. This will probably be wetter than Irma or Matthew were, I would probably say. Matthew may have been a little wetter right at the beaches, if I remember, but this is going to be a really bad flooding event for our area. Weather Prediction Center shows it well too. 10 to 15 inches of rain, and then again with tropical storms, you can always get a little bit more than what the maps show you. Like, if it's 10 to 15, expect the possibility of almost 20. And then the surge forecast 3 to 5 feet of storm surge. And again, that St. Johns River basin, I think, may be a little bit higher than 3 to 5 when you count the freshwater flooding potential and the tidal data that's already showing us above average. It's going to be a rough time, and we're going to definitely see some serious impacts as Hurricane Ian passes to our south, pops offshore, and then kind of curves around us. So, again, the worst really doesn't pick up tomorrow, but it gets kind of rough by Thursday morning, the worst being Thursday afternoon and evening, and into the first part of Friday, like pre-dawn hours Friday, and the conditions slowly improve Friday. The rain will taper off on Friday, but the wind will be longer before it tapers off. Then by Friday evening, things should start to calm down, and things do look better into the weekend. So that's what I got for you guys on your update for all this stuff. If any questions, let me know. My DMs are open. We'll be answering questions. We'll at least post one more update tonight. And otherwise, guys, stay safe and just please take it seriously. And I'll see you soon. Have a good one.